Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday morning. Look at that. We made it to the middle of the week. Well, all right then. Let's do the verse of the day. Psalms 51, verse 8. Make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. This is David, and he is asking God to make him rejoice again after he's been punished by God, because that's what God does. It wasn't not really a punishment though, a correction. God corrects. In Old Testament times, many of his corrections seemed more like punishments because the clock. Back in Old Testament times, a lot of God's corrections seemed harsher because it was a much more harsh time, and the world didn't know love as they know Jesus. But the God now is the same God then, the same God as will ever be. And David knew that he messed up every time that he messed up. Psalms is a whole bunch of David telling God, "Hey Lord, I messed up. You taught me another lesson. Now please love me again." And God, many, many times, would let David know, "Hey boy, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped loving you. Just because I correct you doesn't mean I don't love you. Just because you have to be punished in some form or fashion doesn't mean I don't love you." But the punishments that we feel on earth isn't necessarily a punishment of God. It's a punishment that's a result of our actions. So, on earth itself, just the way this world is, you can sin against God. And most sins against God are also sins against ourselves, or against the world as it is. But you can sin against God and you can ask for forgiveness and be forgiven. But on earth, you'll still have to pay the consequences of that sin. And that's not even necessarily God. Paying the consequences of many of your sin is just because we're human. And the earth is a very unforgiving, relentless thing. God is so full of love and compassion, and he will correct you. But it's not a punishment. Not a punishment from him anyway. We feel like we're punished sometimes, but a lot of times we're the ones doing the punishing for our sins. So David here, he messed up, as he did many times, even before he was king. But he messed up. And so he started asking God to forgive him of his sin. And in this case, make me to hear joy and gladness, because because of his sin, he had to suffer a consequence that, like I said, wasn't directly from God. It was a consequence just because of, well, A, he's a king, and B, earth. Very unforgiving. That the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. So he knows that God corrected him, and through that correction and his own sin, what happened to him was as if his bones had been crushed, because it hurt that bad. This may have been a time, I haven't read this part more than just a few scriptures. This may have been the time when he did a sin and ultimately, or he sinned and ultimately his son paid the consequence and passed. This may be that point there, I don't know. But there was many, many times throughout that David his sins would not only direct him, affect him because he's a king, it would affect many. And even though God would forgive him in part, he would still have to pay the consequences of that. And I say in part because there was no absolute forgiveness of sin until Jesus. When Jesus came and shed his blood for our sins and died on the cross, all of our sin is forgiven. Every bit of it. Not just forgiven, but forgotten. Now, God is God. He's not going to forget something and it no longer exists. But he is forgetting our sin in the sense that it will not be held against you ever again. And that is because of Jesus. Sorry, that was it. Jesus changed it all. So before then, all of the sin was forgiven, but it was a partial forgiveness because it wasn't forgotten. So it continued to kind of stack upon you. So that's why they had all the cleansing rituals and all that, because as that sin piled upon you, it would literally physically tear you down. Because sin isn't just this, invisible thing that doesn't hurt anything. As you continue to have sin stacked upon you, your life will change in a not so good way. So, David was like, I messed up, Father. But I'm sorry, and I love you, and I want to feel joy again. I want to be full of joy again. So please, this thing that is hanging over me, that feels like I'm being crushed, this correction that you lovingly gave to me, please lift it from me so I may rejoice yet again and feel happiness. And this goes on throughout the rest of this chapter. David praising God, praising him through his pain, through his sadness. I mean, God said David was a man after his own heart. He loved David long before he was a king, and, well, he still loves him. David's in heaven. Wouldn't it be cool to go to heaven and get to have a conversation with King David? Yeah. Well, I hope everyone has an exceptionally wonderful day. God bless you.